The last thing the bartender wanted that night was attention. And yet, attention walked into the swinging doors like it owned the stars. 5 of them. Alien. Brutal. Dripping arrogance like venom from a fang. Each one stood at least 7 feet tall, their armor etched with clan symbols and the skulls of fallen enemies. Their skin shimmered like oily chrome beneath the flickering neon of the dust-eater saloon. Each had 6 eyes, 2 for light, 2 for motion, and 2 for heat. And all 6 were locked on the man behind the bar, the bartender. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just kept polishing a single glass with a kind of obsessive, quiet calm that made you think he was either a Zen monk or waiting for an excuse to snap your spine. The aliens fanned out across the room. They didn't sit. Raiders like these didn't sit. They claimed space. One of them kicked over a stool for fun. Another sniffed at a waitress's neck as she passed by, giggling with sadistic curiosity. No one in the bar moved. The usual crowd, miners, runners, ex-cons, kept their heads down. You didn't mess with Q9 raiders unless you had a death wish and a suicide note pinned to your shirt. These weren't mercenaries. They were something worse. Something older. Something that enjoyed the kill. The leader of the pack stepped forward, taller than the others, shoulders like a dropship door. His jaw was wrapped in rusted bone plating, and his left eye glowed red with an augmented target lens. The air around him stank of ozone and war blood. He pointed one thick, clawed finger at the bartender. "You serve drinks, human." The voice came like a slow grind of metal over gravel. The bartender looked up for the first time. His eyes were dark, too dark, like something had been pulled out of them long ago and never returned. "I serve drinks," he said quietly, not smiling, "and I serve consequences." The room froze. Time itself seemed to hesitate. Then they laughed. The leader laughed first, then the others joined in. It was horrible. A wet, guttural sound like hyenas choking on fire. They slapped each other's backs, kicked more stools, and guffawed so hard one of them knocked over the liquor shelf behind him. "I like this one," the leader bellowed. "He's got teeth." Big bark for a meat sack, another hiss, grinning. "Maybe we should take him back to the ship. Teach him some manners." The bartender set the glass down. His hand twitched, just once, barely enough to notice. But behind him, on the wall of the bar, hung a long, steel-bodied rifle. Ancient, dusty, a relic from another war. People always thought it was just decoration. An old Mars-Terran plasma coil, retired from duty like the man who owned it. The leader followed his gaze. He laughed again, this time mockingly. "You gonna grab that antique and shoot me, little human?" The bartender tilted his head, just slightly. His voice dropped like a hammer in an empty church. "No," he said. "I'm going to erase you with it." The laughter stopped. Completely. Silence washed over the saloon like black ink over parchment. Even the jukebox in the corner stuttered into hush. The bartender's hand rose, slow, deliberate, as if time bent itself around his movements. He reached up, fingers brushing the rifle stock. The coil inside it gave a soft, almost silent whine as it activated. Blue light pulsed faintly along its length, crawling like veins under steel. The raider leader bared his teeth. His muscles tensed. 2 others raised their blasters. Too late. The bartender dropped behind the counter, pulled the rifle clean off the wall, and rose like a god in shadow. The coil snapped to full charge. A hum filled the room, high, shrill, electric, a sound from forgotten battlefields, a sound that meant death was about to walk in, politely, and remove your spine. One of the raiders fired. Crack! The bartender moved like smoke, lean, fast, surgical. He ducked, rolled, came up on one knee, and fired. A beam of condensed blue plasma screamed across the room. It didn't hit the chest. It didn't need to. It hit the face, and kept going. The raider's head vaporized. Gone. Just gone. A cloud of red mist exploded against the far wall, trailing chunks of bone and helmet. The body stayed upright for half a second, confused by the sudden absence of skull, then collapsed like a marionette with cut strings. Screams erupted. Chairs tipped. Bottles shattered. The room exploded. "Down!" someone yelled. A miner dove for cover. The second raider drew a chain blade and charged, screaming war curses in his native tongue. The bartender sidestepped the swing like he was dancing, slammed the butt of the rifle into the alien's knee, then pivoted and drove the muzzle point-blank under the chin. Boom! Plasma, brains, ceiling, pieces of metal and bone rained down in a sticky drizzle. Behind the bar, 2 more raiders ducked and fired wildly, green beams lighting up the room like a fireworks show on meth. One bolt grazed the bartender's shoulder, scorching flesh, but he didn't cry out. He grinned. First time all night. He dove over the counter, fired twice midair. Both shots hit their marks, one in the chest, one in the gut. The second raider screamed, hit the ground, convulsing in a puddle of molten blood. The third tried to crawl away, trailing smoke, but the bartender stepped on his back, pinned him there, and emptied the rifle into his spine. The only sound left was sizzling meat. The bartender stood there, covered in blood, breathing hard. The rifle crackled, once, then dimmed. Silence again, until the doors to the back room burst open, and they stepped out. 2 young men, shirtless, covered in sweat and scars, skin shimmering under the lights. One had pink hair tied back in a warrior's knot. The other wore neon blue eyeliner that hadn't smudged even in chaos. Each held 2 blades. Twinks. Someone muttered from under the table. "Oh, shit." The bartender didn't turn around. "You're late." One of the twins rolled his eyes. "You started the party without us." "Finish it," the bartender said. And they did. But that was part 2. Smoke curled in the air, mingling with blood vapor and the sharp sting of scorched ozone. The dust-eater saloon, once a sleepy outpost dive full of drunk miners and bad music, was now an echo chamber of death. Broken glass crunched beneath boots. The jukebox flickered. A single ceiling fan spun lazily, still uncaring, still too slow. The bartender stood over a pile of corpses. 4 alien raiders lay motionless. One was headless. One was still twitching, gurgling through what used to be a lung. The rifle in the bartender's hands pulsed with dying energy, coils glowing faintly, like the afterglow of lightning. And then the last one moved. He'd stayed out of the fight. Smart. Cowardly. Both. The smallest of the 5, lurking in the shadows behind the bar, hoping the others would do the dirty work while he kept his claws clean. The bartender didn't move. Not yet. He knew the rhythm of predators. Knew when they were wounded and when they were cornered. The raider rose, slow, limbs shaking, his mouth peeled back in a snarl. "You filth," he hissed in a language the bartender didn't speak, but understood perfectly. The bartender looked at him, then looked up, at the wall. The rifle had once been part of it, hung there like an ornament in an old Western movie, forgotten by time and by men who didn't know better. But the bartender wasn't most men. That rifle, it wasn't for show. It was a reminder. A relic, a warning. The bartender had mounted it on the wall 20 years ago, after the War of Burning Moons. He promised himself he'd never touch it again unless the universe gave him a reason. Tonight, it did. The wall behind the bar bore more than just a rifle. If you looked close, past the dust and grime, past the old liquor ads and faded pictures, you'd see a panel. Seamless. Black. A vault. Most never noticed it, but the bartender did. Every day, every night. It whispered to him like a ghost chained in steel. He reached toward it now, not for another weapon, but for memory. The alien lunged. Too late. The bartender spun the rifle in his grip, clocked the raider across the jaw, and pinned him against the bar with one hand. He leaned close, nose to nose. "I warned your kind," he said, voice low, steady. "You come into my place, you laugh in my face, you better make sure you leave no witnesses." The raider tried to bite. The bartender broke his arm with one clean twist. Bones snapped like dry kindling. The alien howled. "You picked the wrong wall to stand in front of," the bartender said. Then he shoved the muzzle under the alien's chin and pulled the trigger. Boom. Blue fire. Red miss. Silence. Again. The bartender let the body fall. He turned back to the vault panel. His fingers hovered above it. Then, "We're not done." The voice came from behind. Light-footed, smooth, playful. The twins had arrived. 2 young men, shirtless, slick with sweat and oil and something darker. Each carried a blade that glinted in the low light. Both were smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a feral one. The bartender didn't turn. "You're late," he said again, this time with a slight twitch in the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. Almost. One of the twins, Jax, the one with the pink hair and silver piercings, tossed a blooded throwing knife onto the bar. It clattered to a stop in front of a bottle of cheap whiskey. "We were rehearsing," he said. "Rehearsing?" The bartender raised an eyebrow. The other twin, Milo, blue-eyed and sharper than a viper, shrugged. "You don't stay limber just by posing, old man." "I taught you to kill," the bartender said, finally turning to face them. "And you taught us well," Milo said, twirling a knife in one hand, his other hand resting on the hilt of a blade strapped to his thigh. The three of them stood in silence. Blood soaked the floors. The saloon groaned under the weight of its own violence. Then, thud, from outside. Then again, thud, thud. The bartender's eyes narrowed. Jax moved to the window, peeked through the cracked blinds. "For more," he whispered. "Big ones. Heavies. No insignia." Milo cursed softly. "More Q9?" the bartender asked. No, Jax frowned. "Not Q9. Something was." The bartender turned back to the wall. His hand brushed a hidden groove. The vault clicked open. Inside, a crate. Black. Cold. He pulled it out, set it on the counter. The twins went quiet. They'd never seen him open it. Not once. The bartender cracked it open. Inside, 5 items, wrapped in leather, dull gray metal, aged but precise. The air in the room got colder. He pulled out a sidearm, Matador-class plasma pistol, illegal on 12 systems, still humming softly after 20 years. Then a blade, not a vibro knife, a real blade, titanium edge, obsidian core, forged during the siege of Sirius, drenched in old blood. Last, a photo, tucked at the bottom, yellowed, faded, torn at the edge. A woman with black hair, laughing. 2 children, young. One with his eyes, one with her smile. He stared at it for a second too long, then snapped the case shut. The bartender stood straighter, shoulders square, chest rising with breath that tasted like purpose. "They are not here to raid," he said finally. Milo looked up. "What, then?" "They are here to clean up." "Clean up?" Jax asked. "Cover the mess. Tie up the loose ends." "You mean us?" The bartender's eyes turned cold. "No," he said. "Me." Outside, the thudding stopped. The doors to the saloon stood quiet now, like they were holding their breath. The bartender turned to the twins. "Hide. Back entrance. Head for the scrapyard. Find Zeke. He owes me a favor. Tell him we're burning the coordinates." "We're not leaving you," Milo said flatly. "You are," the bartender replied, voice calm. "You're smart and fast and mean. You're my boys. You live." "Bullshit." Jack spat. "You raised us to finish the fight, not run from it." "I raised you to survive," the bartender said. Then his voice softened. "And I didn't come back from that war just to bury more family." The twins stared at him. He stared back. They blinked first. Outside, boots hit the dirt. 5 shadows, moving like wolves. The bartender reloaded the Matador, spun the cylinder, clipped the blade to his belt. Then he walked to the door and stopped. He glanced back once. Just once. "If I don't come out in 5 minutes." Milo nodded. Jax looked away. The bartender stepped outside into the dark. The door swung shut behind him. Inside, the twins stood in silence. Jax turned to Milo. 5 minutes, he said. Milo looked at the rifle still humming on the bar. "No," he said. "Full." The seconds ticked. 4 minutes. 50 seconds. The dust-eater saloon felt like a pressure cooker on the edge of rupture. Smoke still hung low in the air. Blood, alien and human, painted the floor in thick strokes. Outside, boots had touched down. Voices whispered in a language designed for murder. Inside, the twins waited. Jack stood by the bar, eyes on the door. Milo paced, blade spinning in his hands, lips pressed tight in concentration. They weren't arguing anymore. They were calculating. 50 seconds. Tick. Jax exhaled. His not coming back. Tick. Milo caught his blade mid-spin. No. Tick. Then. Crack. Gunfire. Outside. Close. Too close. Then another. And another. Then silence. The kind of silence you only hear in the seconds before blood hits the wall. Jax didn't wait for a cue. He sprinted for the door, boot heels kicking through the gore. Milo was half a step behind, already hurling his first blade through the air. They burst outside. Moonlight washed the yard in bone-white glow. The bartender stood in the center of it, surrounded by 4 bodies, all armored, all still. His chest was heaving, blood running down his side in thick rivulets. His blade was broken, his left eye swollen shut, but he was standing. The 5th attacker, a brute in mech-assisted armor, was still alive. Barely. He'd shoved the bartender back, brought a steel boot down on his shoulder, cracking it with a sound like snapping branches. Then he raised a shotgun, something too big, too heavy, too final. He never got to pull the trigger. Thwip! A knife took him in the throat. Fast, deep, surgical. He dropped the gun, clutching at his neck, eyes wide in betrayal. Then Jax was on him, legs around his torso, another blade in his hand. He stabbed, again and again, until the man stopped moving. Milo knelt beside the bartender. "Can you move?" The bartender blinked. Blood leaked from his mouth. "Didn't think you'd wait," he rasped. "We left at 4 minutes," Jax called back. "Wasn't a test," the bartender murmured. "Sure, felt like one," Milo said, helping him to his feet. He groaned, but stood. The moon revealed the truth of it. The attackers were not Q9, not Raiders, not Syndicate. These were Blackwall cleaners, off-book contract soldiers from the corporate border wars. No insignia, no names, no mercy. If they were here, that meant something deeper, something older, something the bartender hadn't wanted to face. Milo knew it too. This wasn't about the aliens. No, the bartender said. It was about the wall. Jax looked back toward the saloon. The vault. The bartender didn't answer. He didn't have to. They turned to move, but stopped. Movement. Across the dry yard, at the edge of the scrapyard fence, stood a figure. Female. Tall. Pale hair. Wrapped in tactical cloth, eyes glowing behind tinted lenses. She didn't raise a weapon. She just stood there, watching. The bartender's breath caught. "Huh," he said. "You know her?" Milo asked. He nodded slowly. "That's Wallace." Jax frowned. "Who names a girl Wallace?" "She used to be mine," the bartender said. Then, more quietly, before I walked away. She spoke without raising her voice. "Hello, Cyrus." His real name. Not many still knew it. "Wallace," he said, steadying himself. "What did they promise you?" She stepped forward. "Nothing," she said. "This time, I volunteered." The wind kicked up dust. The air felt heavier. Cyrus, no longer just bartender, looked her over. No weapons visible, which meant all her gear was under her coat. Subdermal, high-tech, custom. "You want what's in the wall," he said. "I want what's buried behind it." He shook his head. "It's dead." "Nothing ever stays dead," she said softly. Suddenly, Wallace moved. Not fast. Instant. A flick of the wrist, a flash of silver. A dart flew, humming through the air toward Milo's chest. Clang! Jax deflected it with a spinning blade. It embedded into the saloon wall behind them. "Twinks," Wallace murmured, disappointed. He brought twinks. "You're jealous," Jax said, smirking. Milo was already moving. He dropped low, rolled, and flanked right, blades drawn. Wallace vanished into the shadows like smoke. Then it happened. A blur. A scream. Steel on bone. Wallace was inside the fight. She moved like electricity. Jax slashed. She bent backwards. Milo stabbed. She caught his wrist and spun him into the air. He landed hard, coughing up blood. Cyrus fired his sidearm. Wallace vanished behind container. Jax leapt onto the bartender's back and kicked off, launching himself over the fence, chasing her. A blur of motion, blades flashing, kicks, elbows, knees, strike after strike. Jax was fast, agile, deadly, but Wallace was trained in a way he wasn't ready for. A relic of war, a monster in human skin. She disarmed him, shoved him back, raised a needle blade toward his throat. Boom! Cyrus shot her arm. Blood sprayed. She staggered. Milo tackled her. They rolled through the dirt, kicking, slashing, biting. She stabbed his thigh. He headbutted her. She spat blood into his mouth. He drove a blade through her side. Cyrus! Milo shouted. The bartender raised his gun. Wallace stared at him. You left us, she whispered. I had to, he said. Liar. He fired. Click. Empty. She laughed. Then Jax was there, sliding the broken rifle across the ground like a gift from hell. Cyrus caught it, aimed, fired. Boom. Wallace flew back, hit the container, slid down, still breathing, but barely. He approached her, stood over her. I didn't leave you, he said. I buried you. Wallace coughed, blood in her teeth. And now you'll dig me up, she said, eyes glowing red. Then her chest lit up. A beacon. Incoming. The signal pulsed once. Then her body detonated. The twins dove. Cyrus covered his head. Boom. The explosion lit the night. The saloon window shattered. The earth trembled. The fence twisted into shrapnel. When it cleared, Wallace was gone. Vaporized. All that remained was a scorched crater. The twins sat up, covered in dust. Milo was bleeding heavily from his leg. Jax's hands were shaking. Cyrus, burned, battered, stood over them. He didn't speak. He just turned and walked back to the saloon. Inside, he stepped over bodies, past broken glass, to the vault behind the bar. He placed his hand on the panel. It scanned his DNA. Click! It opened. Inside, beneath the rifle, beneath the case, was a second compartment. He pulled it out. A small cube. Black. Humming. Alive. He stared at it, then whispered, not to the twins, not to himself, but to the ghost of Wallace still burning in his ears. You wanted the wall. He held the cube higher. Well, now it's coming down. The cube pulsed. Faintly. Steadily. Like a heartbeat. Black and matte. With no visible seams, it hovered half an inch above Cyrus's palm. Its hum whispering things into the air, things too old for language and too true for denial. It wasn't just tech. It wasn't just a relic. It was a secret. And now it was awake. Cyrus stared at it. The cube stared back. Behind him, the dust-eater saloon groaned on the edge of ruin. Fire crackled in the ceiling rafters. A pipe burst somewhere near the back wall. Bottles lay shattered like fallen teeth, and the scent of gunpowder clung to every corner of the air. Jax limped into the room first, arms covered in soot, one eye twitching. Is that what they came for? He asked, voice lower than usual. No, Cyrus said. That's what they died for. Milo followed, dragging his wounded leg. So what is it? Cyrus didn't answer right away. He walked back behind the bar and set the cube on the counter, like it was a bomb that hadn't decided whether it wanted to explode. I found it 21 years ago, he said. He poured himself a drink. Didn't sip. I was stationed on Hades Prime, last month of the Burning Moon's War. The entire moon was on fire. Sky, ground, souls. We weren't winning. We weren't even surviving. We were scavenging tech from dead cities, hoping we'd find something worth selling before we lost the war. He looked at the cube. And then, we found this. Buried under 400 meters of black glass. Whole unit thought it was just an artifact. But it wasn't. It talked. It listened. And then it started showing us things. Coordinates, patterns, faces. Milo leaned in, blade still in hand. What kind of faces? Ours, Cyrus said. The room froze with that word. He downed the whiskey and let it burn its way down. We weren't supposed to survive that battle. And we didn't. At least not most of us. But I ran. Carried this thing on my back, through a crater of corpses and machine fire. He tapped the cube, and I never opened it again. But they knew, Jack said. They always know, Cyrus replied. Just then, the cube shifted. It levitated 2 inches off the counter and spun once, slow, deliberate. A series of glowing symbols scrolled across its surface, language not written by human hands. Then, a click, a seam opened. Inside, light, a map unfolded in the air above it. Floating, holographic, planetary systems, wormholes, redacted pathways. Dozens of worlds flickered, each marked with symbol, each one already dead or gone. But 3 were still blinking. Still alive. Milo reached for one. It pulsed at his touch. Earth, he said quietly. Cyrus nodded. Home, for now. Jax's voice was hard. You said this thing showed you faces. Cyrus hesitated, then waved his hand through the projection. The stars disappeared. 3 faces appeared in their place. The first, a child with jet-black eyes and no mouth. The second, Wallace, younger, smiling, before she broke. The third, Cyrus, but older, scarred, dead-eyed, different. Milo leaned forward, staring. That's not you. Cyrus said nothing. The cube pulsed louder. And then, boom, the saloon door exploded inward. Metal, fire, with splinters. The shockwave knocked shells off the walls, flipped the cube off the counter, and hurled Jax and Milo to the floor. Cyrus rolled, blade in hand, eyes wild. 3 figures stepped through the smoke. All wore long, armored coats, each one as gray, stitched with deep crimson. No faces, just black, oval masks, no eyes, no mouths, no features. Ghosts made of steel. They moved as one. Not soldiers, not bounty hunters. These were archivists. Cyrus cursed under his breath. I was hoping we had more time. Jack stumbled up. Who the hell are they? Librarians, Cyrus growled. 4 dead gods. The archivists advanced. Slow, measured. One reached toward the cube. Cyrus raised his pistol, but the archivist looked at him. No face, no eyes, but somehow looked. And the gun melted in his hand, turned to slag. The bartender screamed. Jax and Milo struck. Like devils, like blades of fury. Jax darted him with lightning speed, slashing high and low, while Milo spun beneath him, carving through shadows. The first archivist blocked every strike. Didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, it spoke, not with a voice, but with pressure. Reality bent. Air rippled. Jax went flying, into the wall. Bones cracked. He didn't scream, just groaned. Milo slashed again, but the second archivist caught his blade, bare-handed, then crushed it. His other hand struck Milo's chest, and he hit the ground like a dropped rag doll. Cyrus grabbed the cube, held it high. You want it, he bellowed. Then open your damn eyes. And he smashed it against the bar. Crack! The cube fractured. Light spilled out. Not light. Something older. A presence. It screamed, not in sound, but in memory. The air twisted. Reality shifted. Everyone froze. Even the archivists. Because now, they weren't alone. In the light hovered a figure. Unformed. Genderless. Limbs coalescing from smoke. Eyes that were galaxies. A face that refused to settle. A construct. An echo. The cube had released its final failsafe. The figure spoke in perfect common. Voice neither male nor female. Just true. He broke the cube. The coordinates are now burned. Initiating final protocol, ward an awakening. Cyrus fell to his knees. The cube collapsed in on itself. The archivist stepped back. For the first time, afraid, the figure turned to Cyrus. You kept the covenant. Now choose war or silence. He looked up, face blooded, arm shaking. I choose. He turned to Jax, blooded, coughing, trying to stand. To Milo, bruised, barely breathing, but still holding a blade. To the dead saloon. To Wallacey's ghost. To himself. I choose war. The construct smiled, and then vanished. A ripple went out, silent, invisible. But it reached beyond the planet, beyond the system, beyond the stars. Every archivist in the room turned and ran. They didn't fight. They didn't finish. They just fled, because the warden was coming. Cyrus stood, barely. Jax helped him up. "Was that good?" he asked. "No," Cyrus whispered. "That was a beginning." They came from the black. No sound, no warning, no mercy. One by one, they appeared, streaking through the sky like harbingers of the apocalypse. Burn trails lit the horizon. Static choked the air. The stars above trembled. The warden had awakened, and it had brought its enforcers. Judgment incarnate. Inside what remained of the dusty saloon, Cyrus knew the end was no longer theory. It had arrived. The cube was gone. The map was lost. The archivists had fled, but their signal had already echoed across galaxies, summoning something older than reason. Cyrus stood at a broken bar, wrapped in gauze and dried blood, a bottle in one hand, a rifle in the other. The saloon burned behind him, flames dancing like old ghosts around the broken bones of the building. Jax and Milo stood beside him, scarred, limping, but ready. "You ever fought a warden?" Milo asked, voice hoarse. Cyrus didn't answer. He just finished his drink and threw the bottle over his shoulder. "I've run from one," he said. The wind outside shifted. The temperature dropped. The light dimmed. Then everything stopped. The clouds froze mid-drift. Insects paused mid-flight. The embers suspended themselves in mid-air. Even the fire held still. Time held its breath. Then a sound like a heartbeat cracked the silence. Boom. And the warden stepped out of the dark. It was massive, 12 feet of plated alloy and dark flesh. Neither machine nor beast. Its limbs were too long. Its eyes were black holes ringed with golden flame. Runes pulsed across its armor in languages no longer spoken. It did not walk. It floated, feet inches above the ground, silent as gravity. A dozen others landed behind it, smaller, cruel, shaped like armored seraphim, wings forged from blade metal, mouths stitched shut. But only one was a warden, and it looked directly at Cyrus. Cyrus Vale, it said, voice like rusted thunder. "You broke the cube." He didn't flinch. "I did." "You released the last coordinates." "They were mine to release." The warden tilted its head, so slowly it hurt to watch. "You violate the Archive Pact. You shelter biological aberrants," it said, gesturing at Jackson Milo. "You defy erasure." "Funny," Cyrus said. "I was trying to forget." The warden raised its arm. A blade slid out. It wasn't forged. It grew, alive and hungry. The enforcers behind it began to move. Jax whispered, "We're not walking away, are we?" "No," said Cyrus, calmly. "Milo just cracked his neck. Then let's make it hurt." And the battle began. The first wave hit like a meteor. The enforcers came screaming, metal wings cutting through the smoke, blades spiraling from their hands. They weren't soldiers. They were judges, and they wanted blood. Jax moved first, sliding beneath one, leaping off the bar, hurling twin blades into the air. One enforcer caught a blade between the ribs. Its scream rattled glass and buildings a block away. Milo followed, his legs still bleeding, his hands now wrapped in surgical wire and rage. He caught a descending enforcer by the throat, spun it into the wall, and rammed the blade into its back. Sparks and black ichor erupted from the wound. Cyrus, he walked into the fire. The rifle he carried, old, scratched, cursed, hummed with stolen power. Each shot from it tore holes in the world. He fired into the heart of an enforcer, detonating its insides like a dying star. He turned, fired again. 2 down, 3. But they kept coming. The warden watched. It did not move. Not yet. Jax flipped through the air, catching a sword mid-flight. He drove it into an enforcer's spine, then spun and carved another from hip to jaw. Milo screamed something, his war cry raw and broken, as he dragged a wire across an enforcer's neck, severing its head. The body stumbled, twitched, then exploded in blue flame. The dusty saloon was now an inferno, walls collapsing, shadows screaming, smoke turning black and thick, and then Silence. 10 enforcers down. Just the warden left. It stepped forward. Cyrus raised his rifle. Fired. The shot struck the warden dead center. Nothing happened. Not a spark. Not a mark. It raised its hand. Boom. Cyrus was thrown across the street, crashing through the wall of the blacksmith hut. Blood erupted from his mouth. Jack's charge. Milo followed, but the warden was faster. A wave of heat and force shoved them back like rag dolls. Milo hit a water tower. Jax crashed into a chimney. The warden approached Cyrus. "You should not exist," it said. "Neither should regret," Cyrus replied, dragging himself upright. The warden opened its hand. A sphere of obliteration formed. Pure energy, coalesced rage. "I am the last memory of order," it said. "You are an error." And then, a whistle. Sharp, fast, thwip, a blade, so thin it couldn't be seen until it struck, pierced the warden's shoulder. It reeled. Cyrus blinked. What the hell? A figure stepped from the shadows behind the wrecked saloon. Pale, graceful, eyes glowing blue. Wallace, alive. "Miss me, Bartender," she said, spinning another blade in her fingers. Cyrus coughed blood. "You exploded." "I got better." The warden turned. Wallace moved, and the final fight began. What happened next defied logic. Wallace danced. Her blades curved through the air like silver comets. The warden swung, missed. She twisted, stabbed. Sparks flew. Jax rejoined, battered, bleeding, but lethal. Milo crawled from the rubble, face broken, rage untouched. The four of them surrounded the warden. It screamed. It lashed out. Jax lost a hand. Milo took a spike through the ribs. Wallace staggered. Cyrus grabbed the fallen enforcer's blade, saw his reflection in its black steel. Old, tired, but ready. He drove it through the warden's chest. The creature roared. Wallace leapt, stabbed through the neck. Jax threw his last knife into its skull. Milo twisted the spike from his chest and jammed it into the warden's heart. It stopped. Time shuddered. The warden fell, and it did not rise again. Hours later, only silence remained. The sun rose over the ashes of the dust-eater saloon. Bodies, metal, bone, and memory littered the ground. Jack sat by the well, wrapping his stump. Milo lay against the old generator, breathing shallow, eyes open to the clouds. Wallace stood over Cyrus. He was dying. Fast. She knelt beside him. "You did it," she said. "No," he rasped. "We did. You always knew they'd come." "Yeah. So why stay?" He looked at her, smiled, blood in his teeth. "Because someone had to make them bleed first." She nodded. He closed his eyes, then opened them one last time. "Don't let them rebuild." And then he was gone. 3 days later, the twins left the planet. Wallace buried Cyrus in the crater where the cube had once glowed. No stone, no words, just silence. A week later, every system marked on the cube's last map began to flicker out, one by one. Something had awakened, and it was still watching.